Physics video. Generally speaking, kind of the subject, probably broader subject of how you do this process of finding the truth. I mean, what are the elements of it, and what is the element of evidence? And so, yeah, I mean, I'd first argue that you have to have a willingness to look at the evidence, apply your best judgment, not a bigoted judgment, go in with sort of an openish mind in terms of investigating theories and ways it could happen. You have to sort of let somebody say enough words, and as soon as they say, well, then Sasquatch send a radio signal to the reptilians on Mars. Now, when they say that, you can say, okay, that's probably enough. Thank you very much, but I don't think you have anything. But you have to get to some point like that. You have to get to a real Sasquatch. You can't close the door because somebody has, where there are legitimate debate and legitimate reason to believe that there could be that this isn't a solid, defined truth yet. Again, flat Earth, okay, just let it go. Fuck it. Perpetual motion, probably most unless they really start off with something compelling, yeah, you can sort of let that one go. I mean, there is an awful lot of energy in the world. I mean, I don't think there's any perpetual energy, but I mean, I just mean there's so much. I mean, right now there's, theoretically, by my definition anyway, a handful of this space is a nuclear bomb worth of stuff happening, energy, movement. And it's a nuclear bomb worth right here, just in the space. Not even without the atoms. Yeah. So anyway, so on his video, this guy trying to be helpful, I think, Nicky Tech, provoked anyway some responses from Pyrrho in writing here, which are just they're incomprehensible, but doesn't really matter. It was kind of funny. It's not. Well, anyway, it's just funny bits. So anyway, I'll read the intro. Some questions, Mr. Pyrrho, and anyone else who wants to answer. What percentage of Gary's theory would you say you understand well? So it is kind of what does that even mean as a question? I mean, maybe you could just say, do you think you fully understand what Gary is arguing, or something like that. Explain why you reject Gary's explanation of single-slit diffraction. Note, your explanation cannot include Huygens' principle, which Gary rejects as bad science. Well, his explanation can. I'm fine. I'm just saying, as soon as somebody says Huygens, whatever, well, I just think I won the argument, is all I'm going to say. Is that it's completely made up. There's no evidence that this wavy thing happens, and it certainly doesn't happen in the 2-slit experiment or the 10-slit experiment. All of a sudden Huygens is unnecessary, so it seems like bullshit to me. Are you not impressed by the fact that Gary's theory unifies everything, including gravity, magnetism, etc.? Yeah. And includes time dilation and explains velocities and inertias and all that stuff. Yes. I'm impressed. That his theory ties everything neatly together without need of math, or something you should at least acknowledge. Well, see, so this is where he says that no need of math, which is the first problem. I mean, there's obviously math in my argument. I mean, the particle, the great thing about this theory is that it matches the math. I mean, it creates inverse square. It creates the things that we know to be existing relationships. It's perfectly consistent with those existing relationships. So again, I just really don't know. I'm supposed to just, what can I say beyond the fact that the theory is consistent with all the existing math I know of, except existing math, I mean Einstein's declaration that photons have mass in some other direction besides forward, and a few other details, but otherwise it's consistent with the math. So this is sort of his mischaracterization, which gives Pyrrho enough room to wiggle out of answering anything anyway. So anyway, I love this. That's not a coherent question. That's not no understanding works. Yeah, I love that. No instead of how. But anyway, I mean, you know, it's just so funny in the that's not a coherent question. Well, it's not a very coherent answer. Anyway, note, my explanation does not have to be limited to what Gary accepts, obviously. Well, again, and you haven't provided any. Your mushy, vague scribbles. Little fuck, wave goes in and blah, blah, and blah, blah. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, I can't even argue with it. It's so incoherent. I mean, it's just so weird for him to say, complain about incoherency when nothing he says is coherent to anything foundational or sensible. The problem with his explanation is that the math does not work out. Okay, so there, where's the evidence of that? You know, that's what you should have asked him. You make claims that Gary's thing doesn't match something. Well, explain what it doesn't match. What math doesn't work out? Please show me the formula that makes what I'm saying impossible, and I'll show you how under that formula my theory is perfectly consistent. Show it to me. Like I said, you're not going to do it with time dilation or relativity, because all those formulas there's no such thing as time dilation. Time dilation is a relationship between velocity and time. It's not time dilation. And my theory is perfectly consistent with that relationship between time and velocity. There's no principle to make the bands from particle collisions. There's no principle to make the bands from particle collisions. He's talking about the fringes. Now, personally, it's quite obvious that people don't even understand what the weirdness of the two-slit experiment is. Obviously, it's not the bands, because the bands are in the single slit, clearly, and an aperture. And so he's saying, he's arguing there's no principle to make the bands from particle collisions. And it's not particle collisions, so to speak. You know, it's obviously the bands are made of particle collisions. There's even Feynman would tell you that. Feynman said they're corpuscles. So he's not even consistent with his idol Feynman. Feynman wouldn't agree with that statement. Clearly, the end result is particles. Now the question is, there's no principle to make. I'm just saying there's no way you could possibly explain why light particles would be refracted when we know they're refracted in prisms. We know there's mechanical devices that will diffract or refract light. Water does it. Come on. Because the noise blurs out into a gradient. Because the noise blurs out to a gradient. Sorry, that's incoherent. Or incomprehensible. It's one of those two things. But it's not true. The patterns seen are easily recognized wave cycle mechanics. Well, again, they're easily recognized. And why don't you show me single slit wave mechanics that create the diffraction pattern in the single slit? The 42 bars, I counted 42 bars, 42 fringes created in the single slit experiment. Show me the single slit wave mechanics that duplicates that. That won't happen. It does not unify anything. Okay. I mean, the document speaks for itself. I mean, clearly it does. It has a consistent mechanical theme. The mechanical theme is shown to work in all these different areas, and it's explained why it works. I mean, there's analogies provided and mechanism, and it's just silly to say it doesn't. Of course it does. It may want to unify those things. No, it does unify them. You can make a counter argument why the fundamental idea of the universe being energy rather than Einstein's space, and that the energy gets bent by matter, so to speak. Clearly, we're a bending of the energy into orbits. So if you want to look at it, that kind of analogy, that's okay with me. We make mass out of energy. We are energy in the form of mass. So if you want to just make that comparison, say, look, instead of calling it space, time, you call it quantum field. What's the difference? I mean, it's just putting the energy where it belongs, which is in the real universe, instead of a fake dimension. So instead of having a fake dimension, space-time, you just take the same energy you hid in that fake dimension and you put it in this dimension, and you just call it invisible quanta. Einstein, who tried a lot harder. But so did that idiot Einstein, who tried a lot harder. So I don't know why he put this idiot stuff in here, like that's my rhetoric routinely, or in the document anywhere. There's no idiot word, but to quote, so that's never my accusation. I have a lot of, like I said, I tended to be on Einstein's side because Einstein was kind of on the side of particle physics, but again, he sort of jumped ship in the sense that even he should have saw the contrivance that was space-time. That it's just a way of hiding the excuse that you have no explanation for the energy causing planets to move into suns. I mean, please, everything else you expect to have an accounting of the energy. This battery, everything, there's an accounting. Every atom, we account for every single movement of every single fleck, every single, what do you call what's the smallest little energy, every Kelvin of energy, and yet will allow whole galaxies to be pushed through space by an invisible energy force. And that's trying harder. I'm not sure. Wishing to unify things isn't good enough. Well, again, so this is some argument that that's what I was trying to do in the first place, which is ironically not what I was trying to do. What I was trying to do was explain the two-slit experiment. That led me to think about gravity and light. Well, it made me think about light, and then that made me think about the idea of light being gravity. And so first off, it just came off as a gravity theory, and it's clear through the evolution of it that it just happened to answer all the other questions too, conveniently. It had nothing to do with an ambition of mine. Its lack of need for math is because it does not need to explain reality. Well, again, it doesn't. I don't need math because there's already existing math. Again, I don't have to redo anything of Newton's, except Newton's presumptions too. Newton thought light might be bendable in gravity because Newton kind of thought it was a particle, like a massive particle. So I don't need to do any of that. I'm just saying, what do you want me to do? You want me to provide all the math? 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, that's good. Let's put that. Yes. You want me to write them all down? Every single mathematical equation I don't dispute? I mean, this is just idiotic. So I'm sorry people have this presumption I have some hostility towards math. I don't. My point to you people is I can't form my theory into some sort of fake mathematical equation. I'm saying the quanta is the explanation for gravity, and we already have the inverse square, and we already have the relationship between mass and energy in terms of Einstein's E = mc². We already have all these equations that define how much mass is in an atom and all that kind of stuff, how much energy. I don't need to redo all of that. I don't really understand how the tie together is neatly done. Well, you didn't read the document. That's the first problem. You can't understand a document, guess what, if you don't read it. And especially scientific documents, you probably should read them once and then kind of go through it again. So, see, this is one of these procedure things, right? So this is why I'm sort of arguing that this isn't any kind of scientific method or any kind of will to understand. You have to have a willingness. And there's obviously no willingness to do the work of making a fair critique. And so there's no Sasquatch in my document. There's no reptilians in it. So you don't get off easy. If you're going to make an argument, you're going to have to make a really good one, because I've already countered all the shitty ones. I can't recognize the difference between sinusoidal pattern and two overlapping ones. It can't recognize the difference between sinusoidal pattern and two overlapping ones. Whatever. I'm just saying the difference between understanding that you don't have to use the wave mechanics of a photon. You can use the field mechanics, the spin mechanics of electrons to explain the phenomenon. There's clearly good reason to believe surfaces of matter are not flat things, that they have density around them in terms of atomic nuclear structure, let's call it. There are extra electrons around the surface of everything. It's not an underlying theory, it's a denial theory. It's not a unifying theory, it's a denial theory. And again, what am I denying? I'm denying the existence of space-time, that's true, a completely unproven fake dimension. I'm denying that photons can be moved by gravity, because I don't think they can. What else am I denying? Anyway, it does not even explain what we see. I think it explains everything we see. It explains velocity, acceleration, gravity, magnetism, and time dilation. That seems to be explaining an awful lot. Instead, it tells us what we see. Instead, it tells us what we see. I don't know. It does not even try to explain what we see. Instead, it tells us what we see. You know, I think it does explain it, and it's wrong, and no evidence provided. So this is another one of these things. So you can say it's wrong, but there's no argument here specific to a single accusation I've made. So he'll just say, I'm not allowed to say light moves at 186,000 miles a second. He'll say, that's fundamentally wrong somehow, because he knows it, because he has proof of it. So that's a reptilian to him now. There's an absolute fact, okay, and if any physicist says light moves at 186,000 miles a second, Pyrrho will say he's wrong. Of course he won't do that. So that's just hypocrisy, right? As anyone can see that cares to look. So anyone can see this wrongness, and yet he won't articulate any of it. He can't explain any of it beyond this vague idea that no one is allowed to dispute the wave theory of light. Is that it? There's no possible other way to describe the phenomenon of light. And if anyone tries to do that, they're wrong, and they should be derided and insulted. Alright, so now this guy rephrases the questions, and I evaluate it with unbiased eyes. Well, yeah, I have it right in the document that this is a problem. You can't, if you're going to come to someone else's explanation with garbage in, you know, you have a bunch of garbage in your head in terms of your emphatic, I know these things to be true and you cannot dispute them, well then you're probably not going to listen well enough to understand anything. So I don't know what this, forget the qualitative approach, come at it from the qualitative angle. Well, anyway, this, like I said, I'm not going to complain that this guy asked some questions, but I don't like the presumptions in his questions in the sense of what he's assuming my agenda is. My agenda is not anti-math. My agenda is that you just make a fair argument, and there's no fair argument here. But Gary thinks you have a very limited or shaky understanding of his theory. Okay, so that's what he says. So Pyrrho says, Gary's theory is not nearly as well defined as the two-slit experiment. Whatever that means. I mean, I don't know. It seems a little bit silly to be comparing those apples and oranges. I mean, really silly. But anyway, obviously the two-slit experiment isn't very well defined, as I've demonstrated, in that people keep describing what the phenomenon is, and it's a completely false phenomenon. The single-slit experiment creates the same pattern. The only thing about the two-slit experiment that is all interesting is that there's a single-slit pattern at one frequency overlapping another single-slit pattern at a different frequency. But that, I would argue, is just a mechanism of having 4 surfaces instead of 2 surfaces. It arguably needs to do a lot more post-production, predicting past results. Why would I predict past results? I don't even know what that means. I mean, it predicts time dilation. It certainly predicts that you're never going to have a good image of gravitational lensing because it doesn't exist. A good example of gravitational lensing. The paper doesn't even have the two-slit experiment in it. It's a separate paper, so I don't even know why this is a fundamental. I don't know why the two-slit experiment has it all anything to do with this theory in a sense, because the theory doesn't really care. If you want to think the two-slit experiment is waves, go ahead. I don't care. It doesn't have that much to do with my theory. I mean, it's still, as long as you get gravitons right and magnetons right, I don't care if you get photons wrong. I understand it significantly to demand answers on the parts I've complained about. Well, in this video, which is hilarious, this video is incoherent rubbish. He has a 5-year-old crayon drawing of the two-slit experiment. He doesn't even talk about single photons, the fact that the experiment's done with single photons, not wave fronts. He doesn't give you any kind of illustration about how exactly this photon figures out how to end up somewhere on the end of the wall besides some magic. He just leaves it to magic. On the other hand, as it seems incoherent, so again, something's incoherent. I don't have a quote from my document that's incoherent. He thinks it's incoherent for me to say light travels at 186,000 miles a second. He thinks it's incoherent for me to say it's a particle. You're not even allowed to say that. I don't understand in the fog of contradictions with nature and self what the real goal is. I don't understand that at all either. With nature and self. So that sounds like you're just trying to do a pantheist religious thing, not physics. Except denying that waves are involved. Well, again, I don't believe frequency is waves. So yeah, I don't believe if I swinging a hammer you can call that a wave. Now if I hit a pool of water it'll create a wave, but the hammer is not a wave and the photon is a hammer. It's not a wave. The proof that he needs to reproduce the math of waves with something besides waves. Wow. To prove that he needs to reproduce the math of waves with something besides waves. That's just so silly. Again, in the single slit experiment, there is no reproduction. The light experiment has nothing to do with water waves in the same circumstance. They don't have the same pattern. So why would I want to reproduce wave math when you only have wave math that matches in one circumstance? That would be stupid. It's a stupid assumption of yours to think the wave pattern is the same, and it's not even the same. Even in the two-slit experiment, what it's not doing is creating the superimposed wave fronts. The 13 bars in one bulge, then 6 bars, 6 bars, 6 bars on the sides. Your water waves don't do that. And that's the two-slit phenomenon. So so you really can't argue if you're going to argue from somebody who's really the reptilian believer in, right? He's basically saying, I believe in reptilians, and you're just not going to be able to talk me out of reptilianism, and you can't talk about non-reptilianism. I mean, he has the extraordinary theory that he wishes not to prove, his photons aren't a thing theory. Yeah, so that's the joke here, is that he has the religious characters, and I'm supposed to somehow incorporate his religious characters into my theory. I have to explain what the Holy Ghost did and what Jesus did in my theory. How do they fit into evolution? Essentially, he's asking Darwin to explain, well, where's the Holy Ghost and where's Jesus? Nowhere in your theory is the Holy Ghost and Jesus. This can't be valid. That's what he's doing. I don't think you understand what Gary is asking you to do. Okay, that's the other guy. He should have put quote marks around this. First of all, that's idiotic to expect. Throw out math. We'll see. Okay, so if you ignore math. Okay, so that's where the guy said, if I ignore math, so I never said to ignore the math. Never. I've never advocated to ignore math. All I'm asking from people is, I'm not going to sit there and go into the minutia of Einstein's field theories, because they're really complex. So I'm just saying, but there's nowhere in those theories that he proves the existence of space-time. He just creates relationships between phenomena that exist. There's no space-time anywhere in the mathematical theory. Just as in relativity, there's no bent space, bent time. There's just a relationship between velocity and metabolism. And I can demonstrate it if you show me the mathematics. I'll show you the clear relationship between the function of the clock, how well it tells time, okay, and velocity. First off, it's idiotic to expect throw out math and what I know about waves. Well, I don't know what you do know about waves, frankly. So that's really a very open question. Why should I do that? Well, I mean, in theory, I'm just saying if you're going to sit there and approach a new theory, a new explanation, again, expecting evolution to have Jesus and the Holy Ghost in it is a silly expectation. Theories of nature without math and experimental correlation to nature are called mythologies, not theories. Well, I think you're the one with the mythology. You have dark matter, you have bent space, you have dimensions of space-time never proven to exist, and then you have photons that have no location. Everything else is required to have a location, but somehow the photons aren't. The smallest things, it just happens that the smallest things in the world are the things we're going to magically give all kinds of power to. So the one thing we can't see with the microscope is the one thing you say is dressed like Bozo the Clown. Alright, I have often mentioned things I like about Gary in a few respects as well. It doesn't matter. It doesn't tie anything together, in my opinion. It doesn't tie anything together, in my opinion. Well, anyway, so, how many hours has Gary spent? Okay, it's really not about... I'm not asking for some sort of respect for the effort. I'm saying if you're going to do science and you can't figure out that I have dotted most of these I's. I've gone through this and through this process of accepting critiques and arguing them and explaining things and playing the Feynman critique and arguing it and doing all that stuff. So I paid my dues in the sense that I've given you a theory that explains how this thing functions, and if you're going to argue that it doesn't function, you're going to have to explain why it doesn't function, and just saying something besides that is just totally useless. So anyway, first of all, that's idiotic. Throw out the math. Well, anyway, so that's the other guy. So I'll just get back to the last Pyrrho response. It's an unreasonable request. So all I'm asking, yes. So what you know about waves? Why do that? Because that's what he's been asking you to do from the beginning. All that I've asked from the beginning was some sort of rational response, and his irrational response, that me saying that light travels at 186,000 miles a second, was essentially saying Sasquatch is an insane disqualification. Just plainly insane. You certainly wouldn't disqualify Feynman if Feynman said it, and certainly Feynman did say it. So this is just gross hypocrisy and duplicity. It's an unreasonable request. Further, I've made reasonable requests, and it's not like he satisfies those. What request have you made? What reasonable request have you made? You're just such a fucking liar. A disgusting fucking liar. Anyway, the thing is, the theory is able to make predictions about what will be measured in a particular situation. He cannot. I don't understand where's that true? Let me see what the question was. When you insist on bringing up math in ways rightly or wrong, Gary views the currently accepted theories, such as light being a wave, as little more than a religious dogma masquerading as science. The thing is, the theory is able to make predictions about what will be measured in a particular situation. Okay, so he's saying wave theory is doing that. And it's really not. waves are the explanation for the existence of the probabilistic outcome, and no one's disputing. It's like he's arguing like somehow this theory disputes the existence of the pattern in the two-slit experiment. It doesn't dispute the existence. It has an alternative method of explanation, which is the electrons are causing the pattern, not the photons. He cannot. Well, you're saying I can. I'm saying I can. His is thus a mythology we can believe, but which cannot as of yet be demonstrated. Well, I'm just saying the substantiating evidence of time dilation and magnetism being explained, I think, are qualitative perks well above any question as to the exact mechanical functions regarding light and slits, which has always been a little bit tough to dissect because it's the smallest damn fucking thing in the universe. What's left without math? And it's math that points to waves. So that's another argument where he's saying math is doing that, and math isn't doing that. If you pay any attention to math anyway, you'll see that it's only a tiny bit similar. Okay, and the fact that there would be a similarity, sort of logic will tell you that there's a lot of similarities in harmonics and frequencies, and the fact that in the two-slit experiment there's a similar frequency arrangement it should not be a great surprise that there might be a couple of parallels in different mechanisms, but to assume that the function is the same, that the mechanics is the same, is just fucking silly. I mean, it's just fucking silly, because now you're going to have to figure out all kinds, like I said, regular material wave through a medium waves always have something to do with the cohesiveness between atoms of the medium. If the medium doesn't have any cohesiveness, you're going to have a damn hard time pushing a wave through it. It's like pushing a wave through if I fill a bucket full of ball bearings or something. Go ahead and try to get a wave to go through it. Ain't going to work too well. So I'm just saying, to say it's wave theory is to say there's an ether, and you might as well go into a whole bunch of other stuff, but you're going to have to explain friction and a lot of other things, because you have to produce these waves, and the way waves are produced is through friction. Natural philosophy that is meant to be physics does not get to drop the math. Well, again, sorry for his mischaracterization. I'm saying, no, all the math is just fine, except for the little silly bits where gravity bends light and where you fakely presume that there's a dimension called space-time that's doing something. It's based on testing theories against qualitative predictions. Without it, it's just myth-making. Again, I'm saying you don't have any of that thing called evidence. So this qualitative predictions, I don't see those. Your predictions of lensing have not borne any fruit. It doesn't exist where it should exist, and it quite apparently is looking like your people are claiming it exists where it can't exist by the math. So again, I wouldn't say that's something called qualitative testing. I'd say that's rigging the test. Like why the sun goes across the sky, well, whatever. Or the flat earth. Okay, so he's making these kind of comparisons. So flat earth is pretty simple to disprove. Why can't you just simply disprove what I'm saying? Just forget the math you used to know you were on a sphere. Well, again, that's not really... All I have to do is show you a picture of the earth from the moon or something, and you're done with the flat earth. Now, can you know... I don't need to do any math to prove the world is round. Now you can know you are on a sphere. I'm just saying you can know it a lot of other ways. You don't need math. It's silly. It's hard for me to believe that you're being serious, not trolling. Well, I don't know why this guy accepted this as an answer without laughing. Unbiased by math. Well, again, see, this is the wrong presumption. So he has this out where he can just say unbiased by math. Take a look at the theory with fresh eyes, unbiased by math. Again, what mathematics am I disputing? And until you show up with that, you have no argument here. Because I'm not disputing any of the mathematics. Really not. I'm not disputing the formulas fundamentally. I'm disputing what values they put into the formulas, but I'm not disputing the formulas. No, I have accepted things by trying it myself. Well, that's just so laughable. I can do the math involved. I don't think you can. I have done. I can write programs that make large calculations. I've done that. Yeah, well, I did that when I was a kid. Yeah, I punched a bunch of cards and put them into a computer and calculated pi and all that fun stuff. Whoop-de-doo, buddy. I can understand it without math as a desperate attempt to deny what is clearly before our eyes. Okay, so this is all clearly spent space-time is clearly before our eyes. It's just so undisputable. It's just so obvious. I mean, ever since I was born, I could just see all the bent space-time thingy happening all over. It was just so obviously bent space-timey. I don't think so. The real mechanism is wave-like. Well, I don't even know what that means, but yeah, sorry, that never made any sense to me. I rejected it right from the start. It seems the silliest thing ever. How do you confine a wave into a little blob called a photon? It just doesn't make any sense at all. The essence of truth, and it didn't make any sense to Einstein, by the way. The essence of truth in Gary's intuition is only the idea that E equals mc squared means everything is really energy in some level, and the principles are forms of this. The particles are forms of this. Well, you're still not getting it's the external world where the particles, most of the particles are not in the form of matter, which is currently standard view and not special. Well, if it was standard view, then they would understand that it's the metabolism of the atoms that is being degraded by velocity. So obviously it's not the standard view. If the standard view was there's bits inside of you going the speed of light and they can't go faster than the speed of light, then they would really understand that, oh, this velocity thing must mean that things have to exchange their directionality, or nothing could move, because the stuff going the speed of light in the direction of the movement couldn't possibly go the speed of light in the direction of the movement. It's merely one of the things Gary's intuition isn't wrong about as far as I know. Well, fuck you. Intuition has very little to do with this conversation. It should have, anyway. It is the work of art. I mean, it's not intuition to say we have plenty of reason not to believe in a flat earth, or plenty of reason not to believe in aliens until somebody brings us proof or evidence. It is a work of art, an angry and ugly one, given its most about being better than some decent people that never took that approach themselves. I don't even know what that means. And instead accepted actual logical demonstrations with then empirically verified. So he would say it's empirically verified that light doesn't move the speed of light. Sure it is. And that photons are waves, to at least match what we see of reality. Just an amazing pile of rubbish, mush. I just don't, I mean, he has obviously no scientific mind. It's a work of art, an angry and ugly one. No, it isn't, Pyrrho. You're just such a piece of scum. Yeah. I wouldn't even dignify what you're doing as art. It's barf. So this guy ends with saying, well, that was powerful. Hadn't looked at it that way. Take care. I don't know whether that's being sarcastic or what that is, but I don't know how you look at this anyway. It is a work of art, an angry and ugly one, giving its most about being better than decent people that never took that approach themselves. So somehow I'm indecent also. It's an indecent theory. To argue that there isn't unicorns is indecent, and instead accepted actual logical demonstrations. Again, where's your logical demonstrations that aren't made out of illogical contrivances? Bent space creates the energy to move planets. Dark matter creates the gravity to bend light. It's all fake. And Huygens creates little baby waves. Anytime you need one. You need an extra wave? Well, just Huygens. Pull it out of your Huygens pocket. Alright. So anyway. Just horrible. Horrible, horrible, disappointing, horrible. Horrible disappointment. but whatever. You know, I have always had a, you know, Pyrrho is just, you know, in the past, he says little things, and you just say, God, this guy must be an idiot to say what he just said, and then you kind of forget it, and you let it go, and then, you know, and then all the times when I think back to times where he's agreed with something, and then the very next day he contradicts it, and it's just like, you know, so many little irritating things like that. I mean, he really doesn't have any kind of integrity in his reasoning process. So that's enough, and yeah, so till the next time, gotta work on finishing up the conclusion, and I think I want to add something. I just can't figure out what direction I want to go in. I mean, I want to give this thing its best shot, but I also don't want to word it to death. So, well, I have a couple of days I can ponder it. So anyway, till next time.